sheets at home. Yeah, we'll survive. Okay. Okay. No. So today's daf is Chaf Aleph. We're picking up on Chaf Amud Beis.
Yep.
Okay. We're holding on the top of Chaf Amud Beis. Very quick. The Mishnah had told us a couple of things. The Mishnah had told us that there's a general rule in Yevamos that if someone's an erva, there's no yibum or chalitza. We saw that if there's an isser lav, the example that was given in the Mishnah is, let's say, an almana l'kayin gadol or a grusha l'kayin hetyet. Right? So it said in the Mishnah that the halacha there is there's no yibum, but there is chalitza. The Gemara was trying to figure out exactly what's going on. The Gemara had a dialogue around almana l'kayin gadol, because an almana l'kayin gadol, again, a widow to a kayin gadol. The kayin gadol has a mitzvah in the Torah.
Yeah.
A lo saseh and an aseh. Okay. We're gonna hold off on questions. Yeah. We're gonna hold off on questions until because we're very behind. Mm-hmm. And unless the question is absolutely I don't understand the English words he's saying, I'm gonna hold off on questions. Yeah. It's okay.
Sure, you kept yourself where you are.
We're gonna be on Chaf Amud Beis, 2 lines at the top.
Got it.
So I'm gonna give a overview. Yeah. So it said in the Mishnah that if you have someone who is also to you min hatayra, but it's not a kares, there's no yibum, but there is chalitza. Now that's an interesting thing. It was the first time we saw that, or almost always we saw. Every time we saw that there was no yibum, there was no chalitza, unless it was midrabanan, and that is true. In the end of our Gemara, we're going to see that that's really the only time. There's one exception we'll see, but either way, says the Mishnah, almana l'kayin gadol has 2 aveiros. The aveira of an almana, a widow with a kayin gadol, is the expressive isser in the Torah of not being with a woman who's a widow if you're a kayin gadol, and separately, you're not supposed to be with a woman who's not a basula. The Torah says marry a basula if you're a kayin gadol. Since the Torah says marry a basula, if she's an almana, a widow, and she's been married to someone previously, we assume she's no longer a basula, as that's what happens when you're married. And so therefore, you have this lady who, for 2 separate reasons, is going to be also to a kayin gadol. This is an aseh and a lav. So the Gemara asked, I understand why there's no yibum by such a woman, because we don't say aseh, docha, los aseh, and an aseh. We just bring hearkening back to the earlier Masechta, the beginning of the Masechta, where we talked about an aseh, a positive commandment, pushing off a negative commandment. Aseh, docha, los aseh. But we don't say an aseh is docha, los aseh, and an aseh, just like we don't say aseh is docha, lav, sheish, bekaris. So therefore, it makes sense that the Mishnah would tell me that almana l'kayin gadol doesn't do yibum, because you can't do the mitzvahs yibum if you have an aveira, a positive and a negative commandment. You don't push it off. But why, by all of the other lavim that one could theoretically punch up against when he's dealing with a yibum situation, why do we not say do yibum? It's a regular mitzvah aseh. Let the aseh of yibum be docha the lav. Even an almana l'kayin gadol, if let's say it's not from nisuin, but let's say it's only from erison, let's say it's only from the early part of marriage, where she has not consummated her marriage with her first husband, and then he dies, so she's a widow, and she never consummated, so she's still a virgin. If she's still a virgin, then the only reason why the kayin gadol can't marry her is because she's a widow. And if that's the case, she's just a regular, normal, run-of-the-mill lav, no different than a regular kohen with a grusha, or someone with a mamzer, or someone with a mamzeris, whatever it is. It's a regular lav. And so therefore, ask the Gemara, why don't we say, let the aseh of yibum be docha, the lav of whichever lav we're talking about. And there are other lavim, but those are some of the ones that are mentioned in the Mishnah. So the Gemara is going to have, on today's, this Talmud we're on right now, is going to go through a series of things. The first answer of the Gemara was, I have a pasuk. The pasuk says, Yevimta. Yevimta was a little bit extra in the pasuk. And the Gemara understood from there that Yevimta was coming to tell me that specifically in a case of chayvei lavin, don't do yibum. Yeah, and since it's in a case of in a case of chayvei lavin, don't do yibum, but you still got to do chalitza. General rule. Whenever it comes to chayvei lavin, the Gemara says, who told you to assume that pasuk was limited to chayvei lavin? Why not say that even by chayvei krisis? Meaning, there's nothing in the pasuk that specifically talks about chayvei lavin. It just says the word yevimto, and we understood from there that sometimes you don't do yibum and you don't do chalitza, and sometimes you don't do yibum and you do chalitza. Ezoizu chayvei lavin, the Gemara said. So the Gemara says maybe chayvei krisis. The Gemara had answered, I have a separate pasuk. The pasuk says, it says that you have to have the ability to do yibum. Meaning, when we say that you do chalitza without a yibum, is only when you could have done a yibum. Since the Torah would have said, you would have been able to do yibum by a lav. Those scenarios, you're going to get a chalitza. Whereas if you're not allowed to do a yibum, then you don't even get a chalitza. So therefore, chayvei krisis doesn't. Says the Gemara. 1 second. What about almana l'kayin gadol min hanasuin, which because of aseh deicha los aseh v'aseh is not true. We don't say you can be deicha lavan and aseh. Therefore, you're not allowed to do that yibum. So why is there a chalitza by almana l'kayin gadol min hanasuin? Because again, the yibum is not allowed to be done. You're not allowed to do yibum with an almana l'kohen gadol because ein asay doicha lo sasay v'asay. No different than a chayv krisis. You're not allowed to do yibum with a chayv krisis. Why? Because ein asay doicha lo sheish bekaras. So if that's the case, then you can't do chalitza l'chora. The Mishnah says you do chalitza. Again, let me repeat the question. And almana, if the whole reason why chayv lavin you do chalitza and you don't do yibum is only because the Torah is saying when you could do yibum, then you chose not to, you do chalitza. What's that case? Chayv lavin. Why? Because if the Torah had not told me anything, I would have said do the yibum because I say it's a regular lav. So then that covers all of the regular lavin. And it explains why chayv krisis is not. Because chayv krisis you couldn't have done yibum if you wanted to. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't explain why the halacha is you still get chalitza by almana l'kohen gadol if it's minan nisuin, which is an asay and a los asay. Because on the side of yibum, it's usher. You're not going to do yibum with an almana l'kohen gadol minan nisuin. Why? Because she's an asay and a los asay. It's two things. Ein asay teich los asay v'asay. So ask the Gemara im ke'i hachi chayv lavin, and the Rishonim explain it means almana l'kohen gadol. So more answers, and this is really the maskana of the Gemara. Well, no, I have two psukim. I have one pasuk telling me that there's going to be some people that have have no yibum and chalitza, and there are some people that have no yibum and no chalitza. So which one am I going to choose? He says very simple. I'm going to choose those cases that have tfisas kiddushin, the cases that have tfisas kiddushin, meaning lavim, even almana l'kohen gadol. Because if a person, let's say a kohen gadol walked over to an almana min nisuin, and even though it's aser, said harei mikudesh in front of Eidim. Kedushin takes. It's chal. It's tefisas kedushin. The only time there's no tefisas kedushin, at least the way we hold, is if it's a kares, erva. So since this woman is possible to marry, you shouldn't. It's aser. Yibum is aser. But let's say you did yibum. So we'll see it for a second. All right. So before we get to this, you would think right now, if I would ask you, would yibum work? You might say, yeah. Meaning it's not erva. Not erva. All right. So certainly if we're not. What's that?
Is there?
We're not talking about Isha.
Any case there's yibum, say Isha.
No. You don't understand.
Oh.
We're talking about kohen almana l'kohen gadol.
Oh.
Yeah, almana l'kohen gadol.
I thought it was only in the case of yibum. Okay, fine. Yeah. Fine.
Almana l'kohen gadol.
We think it would work.
Yeah. We only see that yibum removes the erva. Where do we see that yibum removes a lot?
So it's not that it removes it; it's that it's a mitzvah. There's a mitzvah asay being dochalav. There's a general rule in Shas. You have an asay dochalav. That's why you wear sitzas shadnes or mila on Shabbos. A lot of times we find that an asay will be dochalav. So says the Gemara, why am I going to choose that an almana l'kohen gadol is going to be the one that gets a yibum, that doesn't get a yibum but does get a chalitza, and erva gets no yibum and no chalitza? Meaning, if the general rule is if you don't get yibum, you don't have chalitza because there's no zika, right? What?
Answer like a Rishon.
No. You gotta.
Let's try.
We gotta get the Gemara basic. Okay. Yeah. Get the Gemara basic. Yeah. There's a lot to cover, and it's very important to really stay on target here.
Fine.
So the Gemara is trying to figure out why is it that we say that if there's no yibum, there is a chalitza by almana l'kohen gadol. Again, because asay is not dochalav and an asay. And yet, when we say by erva there's no yibum, there we say there's no chalitza. Why? Because there's no yibum. What do you mean? Almana l'kohen gadol, there's also no yibum. They both have a problem of ein asay doicha, fill in the blank. Whether it's lav sheish bekaretz or it's lav asay, they're both yibum is not going to happen. Why by erva do we say and therefore no chalitza? And whereas by almana l'kohen gadol we say no yibum, but you got to do chalitza. So says the Gemara, if I have to choose which pasuk I'm going to apply to which one of those two things, I'm going to apply the one that keeps the zika to the one that has tefisas kiddushin. Meaning, this wouldn't be a yibum situation. If I tried to marry a woman who's if I'm a kohen gadol and I marry an almana, I'm not supposed to, but if I give her kiddushin, it works. Tefisas kiddushin. So I'll say that woman, when she falls in yibum, is going to have a zika. Therefore, she'll need chalitza. If we're talking about an erva, if I tried to give her kiddushin all day, it's not going to help. So since the kiddushin is not going to be typhus, therefore the zika is not going to be there at all. So if there's no yibum, there's no chalitza. That's how the Gemara explains its difference. Now, that is the Gemara at this point. We're using this discussion to explain why is it that by chayve lavin there's no yibum. The reason why there's no yibum by chayve lavin is because the Torah says by chayve lavin don't do yibum, but do chalitza. So if I would ask you, can you do yibum with chayve lavin at this point? Let's say you did yibum. Let's say a grusha fell to a kohen or a mamzer fell. If I tried to do yibum, would it work? The Torah says don't do yibum. If I tried to do yibum, would it work?
mean, with what? With the Kedushin?
Meaning, would I be married or
Are you really asking?
I'm actually asking the question. Now you. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Answer.
Is it doicha or hotra?
No, doesn't make a difference.
I mean,
no. It's a simple question. There's two possibilities. Answer yes or no.
Yes.
If you say that
You say I could still do it.
If-
Why? Now,
There's no chorus, so the patient.
so that is how in the maskana that is the case. But
Listen.
what happens if that's only working within the assumption? Time out. It's only working within the assumption that whenever we say don't do yibum, it's because midaraisa you could have. It's just midarabana we say you shouldn't.
yeah,
But this is the first time where we're saying the Torah says don't do yibum. The Torah is saying yibum is usher. We haven't yet seen a case in 20 daf in the Masechta so far where the Torah says don't do yibum but do chalitza.
Then we don't do it. We won't do it, yeah.
So what happens if I did do it?
that's the
Then it's
thing.
not
Does the Torah's prohibition remove the whole yibum, which then would be an ach, and then you would, or does it say no, you can't? It's a lav, but if you did it,
You're getting too complicated. It's a simple question. The Torah says this woman does not get yibum.
it depends on the nature of what the Torah's command would do to
Correct.
the yeah.
So the simple understanding would be, I mean, at least the way I understand
No,
it.
the answer is no.
You can't. I mean,
No.
if the Torah says that this woman doesn't get
You can't
yibum,
do it.
then that's like you
Right.
it's like spitting into the rain. It's worthless.
Yibum only can't vouch through the Torah. Otherwise,
If the Torah says this woman doesn't get yibum, then there's no yibum.
You do it with one exception, then the error wasn't removed over there.
Right.
That's right.
So
Exactly.
it's very clear. It's very clear that if the Torah says that this person doesn't get yibum, then that means they don't get yibum. Meaning,
what's the question even?
why is it that with an erva you can't do yibum? Because the Torah said this woman doesn't get erva.
It doesn't say he doesn't get yibum. It says don't do yibum.
Again, keep it simple. The Torah says don't do yibum.
You don't do
What
it
does that
in the
mean? Don't do
story.
yibum. But if you did it, it's still chal. Or don't do yibum. Don't do yibum, and it removes the whole yibum situation.
You're complicated and unnecessarily complicated situation. It's a very simple situation. If the Torah says do yibum with your brother's wife, yeah, and you happen to find the scenario where you're like, you're not sure, did the Torah say it here, did the Torah not say it here, and I have no reason to assume the Torah said no, then the halacha is, if you did it, as long as it's not an erva, it's chal. But if the Torah says, here are these 100 ladies, these 100 ladies you could do yibum with, right? This one you can't do yibum with. What if I did? The Torah said I can't. That's nothing. There's no way I can do yibum with that woman. I cannot make yibum with a person if the Torah says I can't do yibum with
The
her.
Torah didn't say you could do yibum.
Then that means yibum is not possible. There's no mystical connection for the yibum to do anything. All I'm doing is having sex with this lady. That's not a mitzvah yibum. Okay.
If the Torah never gave you a right to do yibum, you would never let that marry anyone.
Okay, weiter. We're going weiter. We are today's daf. No, today's daf is Chaf Aleph.
Otherwise,
We're only
you
on
have to
Chaf.
do
No, we need to have some discipline around moving weiter. If I say weiter, we gotta go weiter. I'm vulnerable, particularly to answering questions. So if you're going to ask a question, it's going to be hard for me to not address it. So if I say we got to go weiter, we got to go weiter. So the point of the Gemara is very simple.
Yeah.
Says Rav, if the Torah says you can't do yibum with someone, then you can't do yibum. So the Torah is saying don't do yibum with chayvei lavin. Says the Gemara. Masiv Rava. Rav is going to ask this question. According to you, Rav, you just told me that there's a gzeres hakasav that you don't do yibum with a chayvei lavin. You do chalitza. It's a special gzeres hakasav. But yibum to teach me that there are some ladies who you don't do yibum, but you do chalitza. What's the Gemara say? Masiv Rava. It's a little bit of a brayse here. Isser mitzvah ve'isser kedusha. Let's you have shniyos, right? Isser mitzvah. Ve'isser kedusha, and isser kedusha is chayvei lavin. So we have chayvei lavin for sure in this brayse. Ba'aleh or cholatza. Let's say you did yibum with her, or you did chalitza with her. It's mashma either one of them. So let's say a lady's falling to you, and one of them is a chayvei lavin, and if you did bia yibum or chalitza, or you did chalitza nifter tzarasa, it's mashma the yibum is a good yibum. And we just said 2 seconds ago, at least I thought we said 2 seconds ago, that yibum with a woman the Torah says don't do yibum with is nothing. It's like nothing. If you're going to tell me that minat Torah, meaning again, not midrabanan, minat Torah, the Torah is saying no yibum by chayvei lavin, then that means doing yibum with a chayvei lavin is a waste of time. It's imaginary. It doesn't do anything. So then kibala amayim nifter terasa. Then how come when you did yibum with the woman who the Torah says you don't do yibum with, why would her tzara be pater? Again, let's just clarify. You have Reuven and Shimon. Shimon is married to 2 ladies. One of them is usher to Reuven as a lav. The other one's a regular lady. They both have a zika, right? Because you could do chalitza to the other lady. Meaning you could do chalitza to this woman. They both have a zika. There's no tour of the tzara. There's no tzaras ervi. There's none of that. Everyone is chayiv to take it. This home has to get a yibum or a chalitza. You just can't do the yibum with this lady. She is not spoken to when we talk about yibum. Yibum with her is literally sticking a key in a door without a lock. There's nothing going on. It doesn't do anything. So if that's the case, why is the tzara now pater? What has happened to remove her obligation to take care of a yibum or chalitza? Even with the other lady who isn't spoken to in the parsha of Yibum, says Rava, that can't be. Now Rava asked this question, he asked this question, but then he answered it right away. Let's stud in Kitani. Meaning, what did it say? It said Isser Mitzvah and Isser Kedusha. So what does it mean? The Baal is going in the Isser Mitzvah, and the Isser Kedusha is talking about the Chalitza, meaning he splits the Bryce up. He says like this. Baal, when you're talking about Yibum, is referring Isser Mitzvah is talking about when the Isser Yibum is only Isser Yibum Rabbanan. Meaning, Minat Torah, by Shnios, the halacha is that you could do Yibum. Meaning, again, this is back to our normal conventional case, where we say don't do Yibum Rabbanan. When we say don't do Yibum Rabbanan, if you went ahead and jumped the gun and did it anyways, then of course it takes. Because on a Torah level, she can have Yibum. The Torah says she can have Yibum. Right. So, but whereas Chalatzla, that's only talking about Isser Kedusha, because of course Yibum would not work with her. Now you might ask, what about Chalitza with an Isser Mitzvah? Okay, that's a different question. But says the Gemara, says Rava, my first question is not such a good kasha. I can answer my own question. Says Rava, but I have a better kasha. Must have Rava, Petzua Daka ukrus shivcha. What are a Petzua Daka and a krus shivcha? Suffice to say, these are men who, on some level, their physical body parts don't work properly. Either the beitzim don't work, or the aver doesn't work. Whatever it is, he cannot have kids. And the understanding is the way he got this way was not from like a medical problem, but rather, this happened through some event happening in life. Either he did it on purpose, or it happened by accident. Whatever it is, a person became castrated, or a person became it's not fun to hear. The halacha is such a person is usher to marry into Klal Yisrael. So you're not allowed to marry such a person. Just like a mamzer, you're not allowed to marry. It's an Isser Lav. You're not allowed to marry a Krus Shivcha. You're not allowed to marry a P'tzua Daka. They are all Sris Adam. The Hazakin. Now, Hazakin happens to be included in here, even though, of course, Hazakin is not included in this list of Isurim.
Right.
We're bringing the Zakin in to teach you that in a minute we're going to see that the Yibum of all three of these people works, which is a problem. Because if you're going to tell me that the Yibum of a Sris, it works, then he's a Chayvei Lav, and L'chora should be no Yibum possible with such a person. We're bringing Zakin here only to show you that also does Yibum, even though he can't have children because he's so old, where maybe he's not KP sterile at this point because he's old. We don't say that he's usher, but his Yibum does work. So says the Mishnah, says the Brisa.
If someone's old, that they can still have children.
I don't know. I don't know the physical reality. I'm saying we're talking about a zakin who can't. Even if you have a person who can't. Even if you have a person who can't, the halacha is, we'll say like this. It says, "Oh, choltzin o miyavin." So let's figure out what the case is. Ketzad. What are we talking about? I mean, who is the yavam and who are the brothers? Mesu, meaning if these people, the krus shivcha or the p'tzua daka, they're the ones dying, right? And so who's doing the yibum? They're brothers who, for all we know, are not castrated. They're regular, normal guys. Yeah. Ulahem achim, ulahem nashim. And so the guys who are dying leave over some wives, and they have brothers who are supposed to do yibum now. The amdu achin, and the brothers went ahead to do the following couple of things: either the asam maimer ben and either they did maimer, or the nasnu get, or the chol. Meaning, if they did any of these things, masha asu, these things work. Meaning, it's a normal case of yibum. Whatever the halach would be in a normal case of maimer, get, and chalitza is going to be over here. Maimer, get, and chalitza, whatever it is. We don't have to do the specifics. The impa'alu, and let's say they did yibum. Come, yibum works. Why not? It's a regular case of yibum. A krus shivcha is a regular person. He's a Jew. It's just that he's not able to do. We're going to see in a moment. It's also for him to marry into a Jewish girl to marry him. But he's a Jew. He has a wife. However, he had a wife. Maybe he had a wife and then became a krus shivcha. Whatever it is, he dies. His wife's got to take. We got to take care of her in yibum. So the brothers got to do yibum. Nothing to talk about. So far, nothing out of the ordinary. The next half is the part that's going to be the question. What happens if the brothers die? So now, the brother, who's a perfectly normal guy, dies, leaves over a wife, and he's got a brother who's a krus shivcha. He's got a brother who's usher to marry his wife. She's a lav. This is mamish a case of a lav. Sometimes the lav is the other direction, where the lady falling is a grusha. Right. But now we're saying the lady's fine, but I can't marry her. So if I can't marry her, the Torah is telling me you can't do yibum. Because what is yibum? Yibum is isha, so I'm not allowed to marry. So the Torah tells me I can't marry this woman. So then I shouldn't be able to do yibum with her. However, it says v'amdu heim, and let's this krus shivcha got up the asu maimer v'nashasem and asnu get a shachal. So he did the same things. Either he did chalitza or he did yibum, not yibum, chalitza or get or maimer. Masha asu. Also, we treat him no different than anyone else. Those things would work with the rabbanon. However, and here's the punchline: the imbalu, and if he did yibum, kanu, it works. Not only that, once he's kona, the asu l'kaim, he's got to divorce her because he's a krus shivcha. He's not married to a bas Yisrael, right? He's not allowed to marry such a girl. Therefore, and why? Mishum shenemar le'yava p'tzua daka, because the pasuk literally says in the Torah that a p'tzua daka, which we understand to mean someone who, let's say, surgically became missing the man parts. Yeah, if he marries in, he's not allowed to stay. He's got to get divorced. Now, so what is the Bryce effectively saying? This guy with a lav, who had a mitzvah yibum, if he did yibum, it works. Now, according to Rav, it shouldn't work. This is Rav's much stronger question. The first question, Rav was able to say, I can explain the Bryces, I can chop it up and say this one's going like this, and this one's going like that. Here, I got no way around it. So the Bryce is as emphatic as can be, is saying that when a Ptsua Daka does Yibam, it works. Why? He's Chayve Lavin, and according to Rav, Chayve Lavin has no mitzvah Yibam, meaning there's no place for the Yibam, it does nothing. So says the Gemara, the Chayve Lavin midaraisa lechalitza ramya, that you can get chalitza, you give chalitza for Chayve Lavin, however, le'yibam le'ramya, you don't do Yibam in Atayra, in Ba'alu, Amaikana. Why would it be that if you did Yibam, it works? Says the Gemara, Alamarava, can't be that we're talking about the psukim we said before covering all Chayve Lavin. You would tell me that the pasuk earlier is talking about Almana l'kayin gadol, that's fine. In Almana l'kayin gadol, I wouldn't have said to do Yibum. Why? Because asay, nein asay, deichel asay, velois asay. But regular Chayve Lavin, I would have said that you are doicha, and therefore I have to understand why. Then do you not do Yibum by a regular Chayve Lavin? We had said earlier because that's all in the pasuk. Now he's saying no. Elo amarava, almana min ha'erisin nami asay velois asay. He's mechadish a new thing, and we're going to come off of this. So don't get too nervous if you don't like it. Yeah. He says like this. He says, even an almana min ha'eris, and even if she's not a basula, even if she's still a basula, the halacha is that she's also to marry a kain gadol. Why? Because not only is there a avera of marrying an almana for a kain gadol, there's also a blanket iser for kaihanim. It's a positive commandment. The psukim in Parshas Achrei Mos and Kedoshim, which talk about all the halachas of kaihanim, one of the psukim there says that kaihanim have a separate mitzvah of kedoshim yiyu, of being a kadosh. And we understand that kedoshim yiyu to include not marrying an almana, meaning and understand that what this would be saying then is that not only is an almana l'kayin gadol an asay and a los asay, even a kayin with a grusha. A kayin with a grusha would also be an asay and a los asay, the los asay of grusha, and an asay kedoshim. So says the Gemara, that's the explanation for why you don't do yibum by all the lav in the Mishnah, because they're all kayin related things. You have a kayin l'grusha, a kayin gadol to an almana is now both a lav and an asay. And right. So therefore, since it's a lav and an asay, you may not like it. Tosa says this maskana. Yeah? So says the Gemara, an almana gadol and a kayin a grusha, the kayin hedyet, is not only the lav of grusha and almana, it's also the asay of kedoshim yiyu, which means the asay of yibum cannot be dochet. If the asay of yibum cannot be dochet, says Rava, this is at least at this point of the Gemara, the explanation for why you don't do yibum with such a lady, but you do chalitza. The Torah says there are some people who don't get yibum but do get chalitza. Who are they? They are these ladies. Why? Because they are a lav sheyesh boy. They're a lav and an asay. Right. Thank you. And therefore, an asay is not doich lav and an asay, so they don't get yibum. Right? And why would these still have chalitza whereas kares doesn't? That we go back to what Rav said earlier. Rav said earlier that if I have to choose which pasuk is going to go where, I'll say that the psukim that are talking about chalitza are going when there's tfisas kiddushin, and when there's no yibum. And chalitza is when there's no tefillah.
Don't forget, chalitza is not really like yibum. Is like he's creating something, right? Versus chalitza, like what's
true, but the general rule is wherever there's we saw like this earlier. Kol she'eino l'yibum, eino l'chalitza. So the split is hard. Okay.
Right. I don't know. I'm not bothered. I completely don't understand when it comes to Tosfos. How can you?
So we're not. Okay, I shouldn't have mentioned it. It's my fault. We're not learning today. I was only just letting you know that in the Maskana there's a sheet that Savishonim who holds that an akayin, a grush l'kayin is also as an asay and a lav.
Yeah.
We learn the Taisus together. Asking questions about it is pie in the sky.
Yeah.
I'm only mentioning that it exists.
I'm saying
that's
in
it.
The Gemara, not the Tosfos. This says in the Gemara, how could you have to have a minyan that it could
It's right there. The Torah says Kedoshim Yilo Lokayim, which is a mitzvah say. It's
what is no?
It is
by every
no. You're thinking of Kedoshim Tiyu. Kedoshim Yihu is specifically by Kayan.
Okay.
You got to look up the pasuk. You got to see where it is. Okay. So says the Gemara, very good. You've explained the lavim of Kahanim because they have now two averas. They have the positive and the negative. That explains why there's no yibam there. But a mamzeres is just a lav. Nesina is just a lav, although Nesina is a discussion. But yeah, mamzeres is just a lav. Mamzeres and Nesina ma'ik meimer. How do you explain those? Why don't you do yibam? You don't have an explanation. The Torah can't be talking about those guys. And I don't have a no for a mamzeres and sin. Well, it's just it's just an asay that let's say do yibam by a mamzeres. And the mission says very clearly, you don't do yibam. Why? Say asay dechalotz. It says Gemara, no. I also have an ma'ikal. It says Gemara, and this already is a major problem. This is a pasuk of be a holy person, and it's talking about machalas asuros, which is going across the board for all Jews. Says the Gemara, 1 second. You've just included an asay on every lav. Every lav is now a lav and an asay because you want to say v'is kadishtem is a mitzvah. You can't make general assays and say every time now a lav and an asay, which is probably what you were thinking before. Says the Gemara, v'is kadishtem, say the same thing. Rav, you're right. We got to come off of this. So the Gemara is coming off of the idea of saying that it's an asay. There's only one scenario of asay and a lav. That's almana l'kayin gadol. That everyone understands why you don't do yibum. Why? Because if it's min hanisuin, min haTorah, there's no yibum by such a person. But by all other lav, like an almana from erisin or a kayin grusha l'kayin hedyet, and a mamzer and other la krus shifcha, whatever they are, those are all going to have a din yibum min haTorah. It seems because we'll say I say says the Gemara alama Rav gzeira almana min ha'erisin oto almana min hanisuin. So this isn't the maskana, but this is the beginning of the maskana, which is that min haTorah you don't do yibum with an almana min hanisuin because she's got both problems. She's a lav and an asay, and therefore we don't want people to think, well, if I'm allowed to marry an almana, maybe I'll do yibum with an almana even if she's a nesua. So it says no. So we answered all almanas. Therefore, even an almana min ha'erisin, which is only usher as a lav, is going to be usher. And parenthetically, why would a kohen be usher with a grusha? For the same reason. Meaning, says the Rishonim, all of the Isser Kahuna will all be up to the case of an Almana L'Kayin Gadol, Min HaNesuin. Since Min HaNesuin, it's also because of a Lav and an Asay, therefore an Almana from Erisin, a regular Kohen with a Grusha, and all of the other Isur of Kohen, of a Zaina, and a Chlala, and all the other things, are all going to be covered and subsumed under this Derabanan, up to a case of an Almana L'Kayin Gadol, Min HaNesuin. Says the Gemara, what about Mamzeres and Nesina? Mamzeres and Nesina Ma'ikal Meimar. You got to explain what's the gzeira there. Why is it that I can't do yibum with a mamzeres? What's the case? Why would I be concerned? What's the concern? If I allow you to do yibum with a mamzeres, you may come to do yibum with who? Says the Gemara, gzeira b'makom mitzvah, atu shalai b'makom mitzvah. I might think that if I'm going to do yibum with a mamzeres, when it's a mitzvah yibum, I might come to be with my brother's wife as the mamzeres, even when it's not b'makom yibum. If that's the case, then what do you mean? The whole entire you just created an Issur D'Rabbanan on every case.
Correct.
Every single time my brother has a wife from my father, like this maybe you're finding examples. So you know what? Listen, my Eishes Ach from my father is very similar to my Eishes Ach from my mother. There's no mitzvah Yibum by Eishes Ach min ha'im. So why not just say that all of Yibum is completely Asur D'Rabbanan? So Gemara says no one's going to make that mistake. Yibum benachla tala rachmana. Everyone knows that Yibum is dependent upon who you yarshin from, as the Torah or psukim earlier in the Masechta. So made the idea, people won't make that mistake. People won't think, well, if I could do Yibum with my brother from my father, I'll do Yibum with my brother from my mother. No one's going to say that because they'll know it's only going by the father. Gemara says, okay, Isha she'ein labanim like this Yabim. If I have a wife who has no children, the normal classic case of Yibum, like this Yabim mishum Isha she'esh labanim. Maybe I'll say, what would it be? What about when my brother's wife does it? When my brother doesn't have children, then there's no yibum, right? So that's so say that all cases of yibum should be usher up to the case when they do have children. Says the Gemara, no. B'banim tala rachmana. Everyone knows yibum comes from kids. If there's no kids, you have yibum. If there are kids, that's every case, right? Reuven and Shimon are brothers. Shimon dies with no kids. Everyone knows there's no kids. Says the Gemara, made the idea people will know. What about Eishes Achav Shehayo Ba'olamo? A regular brother, meaning a normal case of Eishes Achav Shehayo Ba'olamo. We met each other. We were contemporaries. Lotis Yabim, don't do Yibum when he dies. Why? Because Gzeira Mishum Eishes Achav Shehayo Ba'olamo. What about when he's not alive? Says the Gemara, what do you mean? B'yeshiva Tala Rachmana, the Torah says that it's, again, the Gemara is just speaking out now at this point.
Yeah, it's just like
almost strange Havaminas, really. None of these are real. So the Gemara made the idea, but then the Gemara is going to say when that is real and it's going to push off of this. Kol Hanashim Lotis Yabna. Every single woman, just don't do Yibum. Gzeira Mishum Islandess. Because an islandess, you don't do Yibum. And an islandess is a lady, sort of. So let's say, women shouldn't be a problem with doing Yibum. Says the Gemara, no. We're not going to make a Gzeira to islandess. Why? Because le shchicha. Islandess is not shchicha. Says the Gemara. Well, let's get back to the first question. Mamzeres and Nesina nami le shchicha. If the whole reason why Mamzeres and Nesina is going to be usher is because of atu something, well, why are you making something usher if it's so unlikely? How many times have you met a Mamzer? You don't meet them. They're very unlikely. Right? So since it's such a low shchiach case, what's the reason to make an Issur D'Rabbanan? The Gemara says, you're right, we don't. Ella Amarava, the final answer. Says the Gemara, Amarava Gzeira B'Yarishana to B'Yishniya. La'olam, what we're saying is as follows. Erva, the Mishnah said, no Yibam, no Chalitza. That's from Psukim. Sarah, Tzarasa, the whole thing. Yeah?
Yep.
Aleha, right? An Issur of an Eishes a Kayin Gadol with an Almana L'Kayin Gadol, that's for sure Asur. It's an Asay and a Lav. Ein Asay Deich Lav and Asay. That's for sure. Nothing to talk about. You don't do yibum. However, you do the chalitza. Where do I know that from? The Torah says the pasuk, "But yibum to teach me that such a person has chalitza." What about all of the rest of the people who are only chayv elav and enachanami? Min ha-Torah. This is, by the way, how we always understood this din. Min ha-Torah. We say you could do yibum. Why? Because I say zochalos I say. Whether it's a grushal akayin and all of the other ones, we don't include all of these fake mitzvahs essays. They're all regular lavim. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you could do yibum. It's just that midarabanan, we said the first one is going to be mutter. Why? You have the mitzvah essay. Okay, now you're married. The second time you have beer with your wife, is there a mitzvah sibum? No. She's still a grusha, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a problem. So you just married her, and now you can't stay with her because every time now you sleep with her, you're being over on a lav. So we made a gzeira. Don't marry her even to begin with, because what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to divorce her tomorrow as soon as you marry her.
It's the kohen.
The kohen, anyone, mamzer. If I give kiddushin to a mamzeres, the kiddushin takes. Or better yet, if she's married to my brother and brother dies, I have a mitzvah sibum. I'm yotzim my mitzvah sibum with her, and she's not my wife. But why? Because the yibum tells me I'm allowed to do it. I say say, okay, tomorrow night, am I allowed to marry her?
No.
I can't be with her anymore. So since tomorrow I'm not allowed to be with her, the rabbis came along and said, you know what, even tonight you can't be with her.
Much better. Right?
Midrabanan, much more, and it'll apply across the board. All cases of lavin. Says the Gemara, 1 second, I'll bring a brisa. Tanya Nami Hochi, a brisa says to support this, that it's midrabanan. In Ba'alukana, you see this is all by Chayv Elav, and it says if you did the yibum, it's kaina. Now all of a sudden this makes a ton of sense. The questions we asked earlier make a ton of sense. Of course, if you're going to do bia, if you're going to have yibum with a woman who you're not supposed to do midrabanan on a Torah level, there is a zika. Of course, you're supposed to do yibum. Sorry, not of course you're supposed to, but of course, if you did the yibum, it would take. Says the Gemara, bia rishona. Also, look, I'm bia shnia. So that's a riot to this idea. Why express it in this way of bia rishona and bia shnia? It must be to support this idea that midaraisa. Bia Rishon is mutter, midarabanan, Bia Rishon is going to be usher, up to the case of Bia Shnia, which is also Minatayra. So the Gemara says, Hadar Rava. Rava temporarily said, 1 second, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't like this svara. Why? The Isim Ravashi, they both said the following thing, because Lav Milsi Amri, what I said 2 seconds ago about Bia Rishona to Bia Shnia, maybe it's a mistake. The Amr Rish Lakish, didn't Rish Lakish say the following thing, Kol Mokum Sha'ata, Mote Asay Velosa, say, anytime you find an Asay and a Losa, say, Imat HaYachal L'Kayim Shneim Mutav, if you can do them both, then Enechanami Asay is Doch Losa, say, V'imlav, but if you can't, sorry, other way around, then you can do them both, do them, V'imlav, Yaveh Asay V'yitches Losa, say, right? We normally say, Asay is Doch Losa, say, only when you have no alternative. What happens if you could figure out a way to not be over on the lav and still be Mekayim the Asay? It's only when the Asay punches up against the Los Asay and you're cornered. You can't get around it. So the Asay of Tzitzis is though for the lav of Shanas. The Asay of this is though for the lav of that. Wonderful. But there's a way around this. You don't have to sleep with this woman who's an Eshazach, or is a Mamzer, or is a Grusha. Do Chalitza. You have an Eitzah. Who says you got to go sleep with this Mamzeres or sleep with this Chalutza if you're a Kayan? The Mekayim Asay, you're being Yotzi the Asay, Vilois Asay. You're not sleeping with a grusha, you're a kayin, that's allowed, don't do it. And you're being Mekayim the mitzvah of chalitza. The Torah didn't say you have to do yibum.
Right. Either or.
It's either or, it seems. I mean, now you might say, but there's a preference, but okay, you have an option. The Torah gives you a back door. If there's an outside way to take care of it, so then you have no right to choose to do yibum, to do the Aveira, choose to do Chalitza and avoid the Aveira. As it says, it sounds. It says the Gemara, no. What do you mean? Meisvei. So you want to say, and therefore what? And therefore, essay shouldn't be Daichalos essay? That means you can't do Yibum with Chayve Lavin? What about all the brises we brought throughout the entire Amud? It says, Meisvei, Baal Lukanu. It says if you did it, it works. Clearly, it must be Rava that Reish Lakish, at least as it pertains to this discussion here, doesn't work. Now, does not mean that Reish Lakish is completely wrong. It could very well be that, of course, when you have an alternative, do the alternative. You shouldn't do the essay if it's a lav, if you can get around it by not doing it and somehow figuring out a way to do the essay without doing the lav. What we mean over here is that chalitza and yibum are not really an alternative. The Torah says do yibum. And it says if you don't do yibum, you got to do chalitza. Is it really saying either or is it saying no, there's a mitzvah yibum, and if you're doing the mitzvah yibum, there is no way to do the mitzvah yibum without doing the avera. Mm-hmm. That is an asay dechilisa. It's just that you have chalitza as a back. Is that really called an alternative, or is that two separate mitzvahs the Torah gave? Now already the lamdan come to the conversation that we're going to go back to. So says the Gemara to you. Therefore, we're going to come back and say this answer. So the maskan of the Gemara, very quick. There's 3 levels. Level number 1, erva, no yibum and no chalitza. That's psukim in the beginning of the Masechta. Then alman l'kohen gadol, uniquely because it's a lav and an asay. There's no yibum, but the Torah is marba chalitza for her. That's the only case when you have an alav and an asay where there is min Torah no yibum. Now it comes out halach lemaisa. if an almana min hanesuin falls to a kohen gadol in yibum, and he does yibum, does nothing. Even though he must do chalitza, and if he does yibum, they're not married. Pause before you get excited. I know the question. Think about it for a second before you ask. It's not a kares, but the Torah says you can't do yibum with such a woman. Not you shouldn't, you can't. Why? Because it's an alav and an asay. An asay of yibum is not docha, a lav, and then asay. An almana l'kohen gadol is a lav and then asay. Min HaTorah, the Torah says, this woman, there's no place for yibum. Yibum is like, it's just like you're just cleaning the windows. You're not doing anything. You're not scraping anything away. There's nothing actually happening. All you're doing is sleeping with your brother's wife. There is no, in fact, it'll come out that if you sleep with this woman who was married to your brother, since there's no heter yibum, there's no mitzvah yibum with her, you're being over on a kares.
So then I ask you a question. If you say there's mitzvah yibum, where's chalitza coming from?
There's a zika. The Torah specifically is marba, a zika.
Zika
That's the answer.
If there's no yibum, there's no chalitza.
There's a gzeres hakassav. The gzeres hakassav specifically by this case is that there are some women who have no yibum but still have a chalitza. But there's a zika for the chalitza.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just
klutz kashas, we're skipping klutz kashas. A vibe shakasha. 8 seconds, 4 seconds. Go.
Yeah, I don't think it's fair. I don't.
Okay, no, back. Itmar. Okay, you got it out. Mazda. Yeah, no. I'll give you a shot. I'm not at this. Itmar. Bias kohen gadol almana. So bias kohen gadol almana. The reason why I just went through that whole little shtickle over there was because what did we just say? We just said 2 seconds ago that almana l'kohen gadol, if she falls to a yibum, is not a bas yibum. There's no yibum with her. Says the Gemara. Bias kohen gadol ba'almana. If a kohen gadol has bia with an almana, we're not talking now about just randomly walking down the street. We're talking about a case of yibum. Yeah. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Lazar, they both have a machlekes. Chad amar eino peiteres tzara. So one holds what you've done is not called yibum, and therefore it does not take care of the tzara. The chad amar no peiteres tzara. So it does work. So these amarayim are arguing. It seems. Do we say that an almana l'kayin gadol the yibum is anything? Is it just spitting in the rain, or is it something? Says the Gemara, which is consistent with what we just said. Says the Gemara, if we're talking about where she's on a lav and an asay, everyone agrees, of course, over there the yibum is not going to work. The likpacha. Why? The Torah says you cannot do yibum. Not just that you're not allowed to, but it's not called yibum. The Torah says, just like by a kares, it's not called yibum. All you're doing is having sex with your brother's wife. There's no mitzvah yibum. Yibum with her is just a ma'aseh. It's not yibum. So avada, the halach over there is that does not take care of the tzara. Ki pligi, they're only arguing by the regular case of chayve lavin of erison. Ki pligi ba'almana mina erison. Manda omer peiteres, the one who says that the ma'aseh yibum with such a woman is because of what do you mean? Siasei v'tachil esleisasei. That's the classic example of an asay being deicha alav. An almana from an erison is like a regular grusha, yeah, to a kohen. And therefore, it's a good yibum. So therefore, if he does yibum, of course, it pathers everyone. You shouldn't do it. Why? Midrabanan, be a rishona, or to be a shnia. But if you did it, of course, it works. Umanda amr eina poteris. The man who holds that the yibum doesn't do anything is this because loy asi esay v'dechilas loy. What do you mean? Why? For the exact svar we saw earlier, kivan de'efsh bechalitza. Because when do we say dechilas esay? We say asay dechilas esay only when you have no alternative. But this shita will hold that chalitza is an alternative, and since chalitza is an alternative, you don't have the right to rely on the asay of yibum to be there for the lav of being with an almana min ha'erison, and therefore this is also
take care of the tzara then.
Yeah, of course, chalitza would take care of the tzara, that's for sure. But he says since you have the option of chalitza, the yibum is not a yibum. You cannot rely on asay derech if there's an alternative.
Then so, you would have to hold that in every case where there's an isser.
Yes, according to the shita, if you say this, any isser lav and yibum can only do chalitza and not yibum. Yeah, by definition. Yeah. Okay. Meisvei, ask the Gemara 1 second. On this second shita, the Gemara is effectively going to ask what we said before from the Brisa. I have a Brisa. The Brisa is very clear. Now these are Amoraim arguing, and I'm bringing a Bryce at Tanoim saying clearly that if Baal Lukanu, clearly if you do Yibam with Chai Ve'Lav, and it works. So how could that be? If you tell me the Ein Asay Dechel say because you have the alternative of Chalitza, then why does it work? Tiyufta Ein Chanami. So really, even though there's two Shitas they argued, in the end of the day, there's really only one Shita, which is consistent with our Gemara, that Chai Ve'Lav and the Yibam will work. Why? Because Asay Dechel say Chalitza, that's not called an alternative. Says the Gemara, to the Reish Lakish. So isn't this now a complete refutation of Reish Lakish's idea of that when you have the alternative option, we don't say Asay Dechel? Says the Gemara, no. When did I say my rule? Mitzvah. You're doing a mitzvah, right? And if you have an alternative to be Mekayim the mitzvah in another way, don't go through the lav. It says here, you can't tell me that the way to do Yibum is called Chalitza. I would say that this is an exception to my exception. My exception of Asay Dechel say is, if you have another way to do the mitzvah that you're trying to do without doing the lav. There's no other way to do Yibum without doing Yibum. Yibum is Bia. Bia is Aser. So there's no way to do it without breaking the lav. Chalitza is not called a kiyum of Yibum. It's its own thing. That's not called doing Yibum. Says the Gemara, therefore fine. Let's pause for a moment, take a deep breath. Yeah? We just finished Daf Chav. Actually, inside is not a tough read. This is not like one of those types of Gemaras where you're cracking your head on the words, or you're trying to figure out Cheshman and holding who's who. There's no charts. We sat down. I've been sitting for like a day and a half. It's been great. Yeah. This is like a 2-3 week daf. There's so much lumdus in here. Let's say this goes back to the Sunnah before. Amana L'Kohen Gadol. Very, very good shmak stuff. Comes up here a lot as Nida. What about Nida? Nida's a kares. We're not talking about it. I'm just throwing it maybe afterwards.
You never brought that up till now.
Yeah, Nida brought it up in the beginning of the Masechta.
There was?
Yeah. And I didn't bring it up, but it was Tosa brings it up. Okay, now we're moving off of this topic. We're moving to another topic. We're going to talk about something called shniyos. Okay, shniyos. What are shniyos? Do you need to take something? You need to get something out?
It's the thing. It just bothered me. I have to get it out.
No, get over it.
Huh?
About what I'm about to say, or about
from before? Yeah.
something that's fair?
Yeah.
Okay, 6 seconds. Go.
6 seconds. Okay, so this is the guy that has no, he has
no
beard.
conversation. No, we got to move on. It's just I'm telling you, it's for your own personal benefit. It's hurting the rest of us, and honestly, it's going to take too much time. We have so much to cover. We have a full daf to cover right now, and it's late. I mean, it's
Okay.
getting out of hand. Okay. So says the Gemara. Before we get to, I just want to. We need to understand a couple of things at the outset. The Gemara we just came through. Like I said, it's a 2-3 week Gemara. All of your questions were not bad questions. They're just not. They're not appropriate for the pace that we need to cover. That's all they are. They are good questions. They are good questions, and they shouldn't be asked. I don't want you to think chas v'shalom that asking a question about trying to come to a havana, especially with depth, is not a good thing. It's just the context matters, and so since we have to cover ground, that's number one. Number two, those questions are all. They come out of the fact that the Gemara is saying in each line huge statements, and those statements have reverberating effects in all areas. So it's normal to have, well, what would it mean if this, and what would it mean if that? 100%. The Gemara we're about to do right now is less fundamental and yesodistic that way, but it's technical. It's a technical Gemara. It's not particularly complicated. It's hard to keep track of who we're talking about. And I'll explain to you why. Up until now, we've been discussing all of these different arayas. We had 15 listed in the Mishnah. And then we had another 6 listed in the second Mishnah. And there are other ones that we didn't even list, right? And those are just the ervas. And you have lavin, and there's a lot of lists in the Torah. I don't know where my cheat sheet for Yevamos went. I mean, there's tons. There's just tons going on.
Those are all the
Over here down the side. These are all of the different. There's a lot. Because I'm young. And good eyes can I know. Yeah? It says the Gemara. So it says like this. So min ha-Torah, there are various different arayas. We went through them. There's imay, bitay, bas bitay, bas bitay, bas bina, bas. Now, we mentioned it yesterday, but I'm just going to give you some example. Am I allowed to have bia? Am I allowed to marry my father's brother's wife? My uncle. My father's brother's wife. Try to imagine your father's brother's wife.
It's your uncle's wife. I don't think so. I think that's
an erva. That's in the Torah. My Eishes Achi Aviv is Asur min ha-Torah. It's an erva. My father's brother's wife. Okay. What about my mother's brother's wife? Same thing, just on my mother's side. It's my uncle's wife. Meaning, when I was growing up, my uncle Stephen's wife Debbie, and my uncle, my uncle Alex's brother's wife Vera. These two ladies to me were just my uncle's wives. Turns out, halacha looks at them completely different.
Wow.
If it's my father's brother's wife, she's an erva to me. If it's my mother's brother's wife, then she's not an erva to me. The Torah does not speak about her. Even though in my family, if I hug her and I hug her, they're the same thing. I got yelled at by both of them. How you're not hugging your aunts, right? This woman over here is an erva, not an erva. This woman is an
You
erva.
said it last time. It's the only error that's not, right?
Well, I'm using it as an example. We're going to see today a couple of them. We're going to see a couple of examples of people where what the Torah basically said was there's a specific woman that's an erva, whatever that woman is. Now, let's say that woman happens to be your aunt, what we would call your aunt. So the rabbis came along and said, it's hard to keep track of my aunt from my father, from my mother. So they said aunts. Your grandmother, is your grandmother an erva?
The regular grandmother.
Yeah.
Your mother's mother is an erva.
Yeah.
That's the only one. Your father's mother is not an erva.
What?
Nope.
That's crazy.
Right? We haven't come up across father's mother.
Oh, that's
Father's
disgusting.
mother is it is.
Ugh.
But what do you mean? That's the first thing that
It's your
we're
grandmother.
talking about. We're talking
I
about
was
brothers.
saying,
And,
but
okay,
thinking
no, yeah, okay. Well,
So we look at the 15, you won't see that.
you won't see her there.
The other one is
Right.
Ugh.
Yeah, sure. Aim Aviv is sorry. Aim Imai is an erva. Yeah. Sorry, no. I take that back. No, take that back. No. Amy is also not an erva. Your mother's mother.
So no grandmother,
Right, yeah,
you're saying.
Wait,
No. There's no. Yeah, no. There's no. Sorry, take it back. No grandmother is an erva. It's your grandfather's. It's your grandfather's
Wife?
Okay, one second. I got me confused. There's your father and there's your father's wife.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no one on the grandfather level for a man that's going to be an erva. Meaning, there are no grandparents that are
Or
women
whatever it is.
for a man. For a woman,
Father, you're saying.
for a woman,
No.
her grandfather's a problem. Her father's father is a problem. Think about it. Let's say you have a girl. Her father's father, from the father's father's perspective, who is she? She's the daughter of his son. That
Yeah.
is Bas Beno.
Yeah.
Bas Beno.
Yeah.
Bas Beno. That's the daughter of my son. That's in the Mishnah.
Right.
Right? Bitay Bas. Go ahead. Right? What did it say in the Mishnah? Bitay Bas Beno. Right? And then it said Bas Ishtay, Bas Bita, Bas Beno. So there's Bas Beno. What's Bas Beno? That's the daughter of my son. My son's daughter is my granddaughter. So me with my granddaughter is a problem. But my wife with our grandson, not a problem. Again, let's follow that. Midaraisa, it's an erva for a grandfather to be with his granddaughter.
Yes.
But it is not midaraisa usher for a grandmother to be with her grandson.
Okay.
Even though, from our perspective,
Same
Same thing.
Seemingly.
so the rabbis understood that. The rabbis came along and said, if I'm going to tell you that this thing's an erva, we are going to confuse that all day. If you tell me, if I said to you, a grandparent was with a grandkid, you'd be like, ugh, right? Well, in HaTorah, there's only ugh if it's grandfather with granddaughter. Grandmother with grandson is fine. That's another example of what we just spoke about of, let's say, my uncle's wife. If it's my uncle from my father, erva. If it's my uncle from my mother, not an erva. So the rabbis came along and said that there are going to be these secondary relationships that are problematic. In Hebrew, we call these secondary relationships shnios. There's rishonos, those are the ervas. Then there's shnios. Shnios are these Rabbanan relationships. Now, at the outset of today's daf, for the next little bit, I'm going to set a couple of ground rules. You're not going to get every single one of the cases given. If we're walking through the following Gemara thinking that every single time I say Eshes Achi Aviv Me'imai, you're going to get it, you're not. This is a Gemara that if you want to understand it, I'm just being straight, you're going to have to review it on your own. And honestly, as I read through it, I may make a couple of mistakes. But in the interest of covering ground and the interest of touching base, this is. I would not have wanted to shortchange the Gemara we just did. This is a fundamental, basic. If you don't learn Daf Chaf with the basic understanding of what's going on, it could ruin the rest of Yevamos. If you don't get Shnios completely, I'm not going to sit there and tell you that your Yevamos is ruined.
Wow.
Really, in the end of the day, if you fix up one of the, you're not going to remember it anyway. So, Rabbi, you understand what I'm saying? I don't feel the right move here is that we need to nail everything down. We're going to get it as clearly as we can, but I want to, in the interest of covering cover. Says the Gemara, Omar Rava. We are, 8 or 9 lines from the top of the Gemara. Amar Rava, what did it say in the Mishnah? It said in the Mishnah that one of the women, if they fault you, you don't do yibum, but rather you do chalitza. It said in the Mishnah, Isser mitzvah. And we explained in the Mishnah that those were shnios. So off of that, our Gemara is saying, okay, we're talking about shnios, let's talk about shnios. Amar Rava,
What does shnius mean again, please?
shnios literally means that there are rabbanon relationships. So that would be like your wife's, or your father, your mother's brother's wife. Min Torah, she's mutter. Min Rabbanon, we said she's usher. All of the similar relationships. Meaning it's in the Rabbanon, but says the Gemara, I want to find the remes to it in the Torah. I want to find some support for the idea that the rabbis went ahead and made some shnias. So before we get to the cases, we're just going to go through a couple of different psukim that could potentially be a makar. Shnamar the pasuk says, "Kias kolati evas." El, I'm not sure what the word. I think it's el. Asu anshe haaretz. All right, all of the Te'evas ha'el, also anshe haaretz. And in this context, the word el means kosher.
Right.
It means ha'el koshos. Mechlal dikrachos. So the word kel here is as kol ha'to'evos ha'el. To'evos ha'el imply that there are to'evos that are el, that are kosher. That also means there must be to'evos that are not kosher. What are not kosher? Those are the softer ones. Those must be umay nienu shnias. Okay, one remes. Umay mashma the ha'el lishna de kosher. Who says that the word el means kosher? Who says that means hard? That there are therefore softer ones? Says the Gemara. The pasuk says in Yechezkel, it says ve'es eli haaretz lakach, the strong ones of the light. So you see that the word eli is strong. It means hard kosher, and therefore there must be softer ones that are the rabbanos. Lema pligid Rab Levi. Maybe this svara of saying the pasuk of as kol hate'evos ha'el was referring to kosher is arguing with Rab Levi. Rab Levi kosher oinchin shel midos. Midos. What is midos? Measurements. Right? Kasha oinchin shel midos, the punishment of a person who does not keep a balanced scale when you're doing business, right? So if someone comes in and all of a sudden, for some reason, it's constantly going up, you're paying more than you really should. Says the Gemara, Kasha oinchin shel midos yosim oinchin shel arayos. The punishment from one who keeps unbalanced scales is even worse than the punishment of someone who sleeps with all of these illicit relationships. Why? Shazed nemer behen el, because the pasuk says by midos, by measurements, the use of the word el. V'zeh nemra behen ela, and this one it says ela. So what do you see? So the kasha is that if you're telling me the word el means kasha, here we're saying that el, well, ela is even stronger. The Gemara says. The Gemara says el kasha ve'ela kasha ma'el. Okay, so whatever. The Gemara answers what it is. So I asked the Gemara, Gabi Arayas nami haksiv ela, meaning you have both the el and the ela. Says the Gemara, hahu lemuti midos mikaris. So what we're really basically saying over here is as follows. El teaches me that shniyos are that the ervas are called el strong. So therefore, it tells me that there are softer ones, and those are the shniyos. But the pasuk of el and ela, what exactly is it about midos that's more chomer than arayos? Not the punishment. One gets karis, the other one doesn't get karis, right? That can't be. So what does it mean? Says the Gemara, alamai chumrayu. What is more chomer about midos? What did he mean when he said yoser mi'onchin shel arayos? He says, honey after b'tshuva, honey le after b'tshuva. You could do tshuva on arayos. Outside of creating a mamzer, where, okay, she's walking around in the world, you can always do tshuva. But how are you going to do tshuva if you use...
To pay it back. No, can you pay
someone comes into my store. For the last 10 years, I've had my scales completely, I've been putting my thumb down on the thing. And now all of a sudden, I got to find every guy who's come through my store in the last 10 years, I got to go pay him back. I'll tell you a very quick story.
10 years. It could be one time.
When I went to high school, we were in Hafter, and unfortunately, Chatoyani Maskir, we used to go. There was a pizza store, Shula's, used to be right there. I'm not going to lie. Great pizza, but that's not why I bring it up. Pizza Shula was a very understanding place. Woman Shula was a very nice lady.
I love her.
We used to always take Snapples out. We would pass by, we'd grab Snapples, and we would just walk.
And no one knew what was going on.
No one knew.
And that Turkish salad.
I'm telling a story for a specific reason. You're telling me about pizza. I have no interest. Yeah.
Turkish salad.
Whatever. Yeah. We used to pass by. Guys would grab the Snapples. I would grab the Snapples. So when we came back from Israel after we got off front, we went back. I went back in. I went back in a couple $100. I said, I have no clue.
Wow.
I have no clue what I took over the years. I would never blatantly go in and take pizza and leave, but Snapple, I'll pay it back. You make the
cheshbon. Over there.
Everyone did it. I mean, I hate to say I saw from kids doing it. It was just whatever. But I went afterwards, and a lot of friends of mine did also. And the funny thing is, when I went, you think you're the first person to come in and came back. Yeah, 100%.
Wow.
Because it was right across the street. They kept the fridge right by the door. So you pop in, you say, buddy, it was crazy a balagan in there. I grab a Snapple, I go. Take a walk down the block. Terrible things I did. Averas, mamish. Deraisis. This is it. You can't do tshuva. that's the opposite. This is the other way around. She was super honest, and we were doing not nice things. But it's hard to do tshuva. I'm not sure if I'm hoping I paid her back enough. I don't know. I never sat and counted how many snapples I took.
Because I think the shoe was meaning if you can, I think she was
Could be she was Michael. Could be there was 100%. As far as I asked Shaila afterwards, and Rebbeim told me that what you did was bad. Yeah, tshuva. She was probably Michael. She knew what was going on. But still, even so. Well, okay. Either way, says the Gemara. Midos very important. Not just midos acting like a person, but really keeping measures properly. It's very, very important to not give different price. I know a guy who runs. I don't know how he runs his business. He does, and he's in your business. He does catering and events and stuff like that. He charges a different price to different people, depends on how much money they have. Like the guy has a big house.
Chandelier pricing. You walk in, you see the chandelier.
Oh, this guy could pay.
Is that honest?
That's completely dishonest. You have a business. You charge a price for a product, but for you, you could afford it.
Really?
No,
Even
I'm
if
saying
service is different though.
No,
if you give him a better service, different story. But I know a guy that does a bris. It's the same two guys making the eggs. It's this guy it's $4,000, and that guy's $8,000. Same shtick. Why? Because he knows this guy drives a Tesla, this guy drives a whatever.
Like shidduchim, like for example, let's
same
say
thing. Who gets a
No,
but there's a little bit different. That's
what I'm saying. So like there's some people that can't afford. Yeah, whatever it is, you give.
It's a little bit different. Here we're talking about the exact same thing. Okay, says the Gemara. Reviewed on Mehacha. Second svara, second makar for this din of shniyos. V'izen v'chike tiken mishmasholam harbe. There's Shlomo Melech saying v'izen. Right, and the lashon of ears. The izain v'chiker, the tikin mashalom harbe. Shlomo Melech made a lot of takanas. What does it mean, izain? Amar Ula said, Amar Belazar kodem sheba Shlomo before came along. Ha'isa Torah doima lekfifa she'ein lo aznayim. The Torah was like a basket or a pot without hands. Ad sheba Shlomo v'asala aznayim, until Shlomo Melech came along and made the takana of shniyos, which gave us a handle, meaning we really couldn't handle the mitzvahs min haTorah. They were very difficult. We were constantly butting up against all of these averas min haTorah. So he came along and created siyagim, created these fences to keep us from doing them. Therefore, that's the pasuk. That's the second one. Rabbi Yisha Amar Mehacha. It's a pasuk in Mishlei. Also Shlomo Melech Pira'ehu al ta'avar by. If you'll grow it, Pira'ehu is like the same language we say. Rashi says over here, Hagilahu le'iser. He doesn't say where it comes from, but here it says K'ma Gidol Pera, like by a nazir. Right, a nazir Pera means to grow. Grows his hair. So over here it means grow it. Grow it meaning add upon the Torah's laws by adding on it shniyas. Grow al ta'avar, and through that you will not be over on it. Sita me olav over. Fine. So that's a separate pasuk. It's in Mishlei. So far we have psukim in Tanakh. Wonderful. Rav Ashi mashal de Rav Ashi lemad davar daima. This idea of Rav Ashi is of Rav Ashi. Sorry, what is it like? La'odam mishamer pardes. It's like a person is watching over an orchard. Mishamra mi b'chutz. If he's watching it from outside. Kula mishtamer, the entire thing is going to be covered. He's going to be able to see the whole thing. However, mishtamer mifnim, but if you're standing inside of it, shalafana, whatever in front of you is mishtamer covered. However, shalachra ve'ina mishtamer, when you're too close to it, you can't watch the whole thing. So too, we'll say that the derabbanans are going to protect the deraises also over here, right? So if you make derabbanans, you can protect it. Whereas if you don't make the rabbanans, then what's in front of you, the deraises you'll take care of. But the other stuff you're not paying attention to, you may be over them inadvertently. So the rabbanans, it's like it allows you to watch over the whole thing. Says the Gemara, the Hadar of Ashi Bedusi, it's a mistake. This analogy is not 100%. It's not a good mashal. Why? Hasam shalafan of Mia Mishtamer. At least in his analogy, if I'm watching over an orchard, right, I'm going to watch over the whole thing from the outside. Sorry, what I'm watching in front of me is going to get taken care of. However, Hacha, Ilav Shniyos, had the rabbis not come along and made Shniyos, Paga be'erva gufa. You could theoretically speaking be over on an erva. Says there that's not because if you don't make Shniyos, and I might think, well, okay, so I'm allowed to be with my grandmother, so then my wife's allowed to be with her grandfather. I mean, you can come to a scenario where for me it's not an erva, for her it's an erva. So therefore, the Shniyos protects against that. Okay, last one. Rav Kahana Amar Mehacha. Where does it come from? The pasuk says in Vayikra. It's the first one that's in the Torah. Ushmartem es mishmarti. Famous pasuk. It's a pasuk specifically by Arias that Hashem says, "Watch over my watchings." Right. So we understand from there. Also, mishmeres mishmarti. Make a fence around my own rules. Meaning that's like a rule, but by Arias, go ahead and make Shniyos. That's how the Gemara understands.
But that would make it sound like you make a esar, meaning make a gzera on a gzera. We don't do that.
Shniyos by definition, we'll see in a minute, is gzera, but that's not even the point. Meaning mishmeres mishmarti is Hashem has his own rules. Don't do this, don't do that. Says Hashem, go you rabbis make some don't do's on top of my That's all he means.
Wow.
That's the rabbis on the Raisa. Amalei Abayla of Yosef. 1 second, you telling me it's from a pasuk in the Torah? Deraisa. We've been talking about Shnias only being Midarabanan. This is Deraisa, then Shnias is not Midarabanan. It's Deraisa. Gemara says no. Deraisa Pirsha Rabbanan. It's Deraisa, but the rabbis were just explaining. Says the Gemara. Kol Torah Nami Pirsha Rabbanan. If that's the case, every single time the rabbis explain what's going on in the Torah, that should have a status of Deraisa. He says you're right. Element Derabanan Ukras Machta Ba'alma, and therefore Shnias is Midarabanan. So we have 4 different drushes, whatever they are. Shnia is Zasa Midarabanan. The Gemara is now going to bring a brisa, and in this brisa we're going to mention all of the Shnias. We'll take it slowly. We'll cover what we can, and the Mirz Hashem will understand it. Tana Rabbanan. Brisa says, "Have a great day."
You too, Ken.
Mahem Shnias. Who are the Shnias? Ein Imai, your mother's mother. Again, your mother is an erva. Your mother's mother is not an erva. So your mother's mother is usher to you as a Shnias to your mother. Again, the fundamentals of Shnias are that a Shnia, a secondary relationship, is going to be a problem because it reminds you, or in some level, it comes from a real erva. So if your mother is an erva, you don't want to be with your mother.
Right.
So your mother's a problem. Why? All to your mother. What about your mother's mother? We'll see in the Gemara. That's also usher. Why? Because that's also like an extension of your mother. So you might start saying, what do you mean that's Xer? The answer is no. If it's all coming off of the mother, that's called one Xer. Okay, so Amy Moy, that's one. Your mother's mother. The aim aviv. Okay, so now we already have, this is an interesting one. Aim aviv, your father's mother. Your father's not an erva, he's a man. So why should father's mother be a problem?
Mm-hmm.
Very simple. Your father's mother is very similar to your mother's mother. His mother, the baba.
Mm-hmm.
What's your father's mother? Also your bubby.
Yeah.
So if your grandmother's usher on your mother's side, why? Because she's up to your mother. So you see how we have the rabbanans and the rabbanans here, right? So my mother is an erva, so my mother is also going to be usher because of my mother. So then so too, once I tell me that my mother's a problem, well, my father's mother's going to be a problem too. Now you might start asking, but that's Xera. That's not Xera. Why? Because it's all part of supporting the idea. We don't want you to come to be with your mother. Says the Gemara. So those are 2. We have 2 so far in the price.
Wait, but how did it? Maybe we don't want you to come to with your mother.
We'll get to it in the Gemara.
Okay.
Says the Gemara. So we have mother. There's an erva. Aim mo, mother's mother.
Yeah.
And then we have father's mother.
Yeah.
So that's 2. Now we have. What's the spot? The aim imai the aim of. Okay. The ashes avi aviv. This is your father's wife. Let's think for a second. That's your grandfather's wife. Who was that? It's your grandmother, right? So we just said 2 seconds ago, your mother's a problem, and therefore, because of that, your father's mother's a problem. Well, if your mother's a problem because she's your grandmother, so then your father's mother's a problem because she's your grandmother. The Ashes Avi Aviv, what is she? She's 2 things. She's your grandmother. She's the Ashes Avi Aviv. She's your grandfather's wife.
Yeah.
Now, she may not be your, right? She may not necessarily have birthed your father, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's the Ashes Avi Aviv. It's your father's wife.
Yeah.
But is your father's wife a problem?
Yes.
Min HaTorah. That's an erva. So then if your father's wife's a problem, your father's wife's a problem. Because it's similar to your father's wife. So that's also an erva. So that's 3. Ashes Avi Aviv. That is your father's wife. The Ashes Avi Imai. Well, once we're telling me that the wife of my father's father is a problem, so then the wife of my mother's father is going to be a problem. Ashes Avi Imai. So that's 4. So those, we just knocked out basically 4 grandparents. That's what they are. Meaning either, and really it all comes from Imai. All of the grandparents come from Imai. My mother is an erva, therefore Amy, my mother's a problem. Why is my father's mother a problem? Because my father's mother is very similar to my mother's mother. Mm-hmm. Now, what about my grandfather's wife? My grandfather's wife is my father's wife. My father's wife is an erva, so my grandfather's wife is going to be an answer to that. Mm-hmm. And okay, so 1 second. So what about my mother's, let me just make sure I have it right. My mother's father's wife. My mother's father's wife. What is she? So she's an erva up to what? Also up to Einimai. I mean, so you see clearly that the Rabbanans extend past the erva. Yeah. So that's the 4th case. Basically, we just knocked out all the grandparents.
Yeah.
Okay. Says the Gemara. Next level, we're talking now about aunts. Okay.
Okay.
The Ashes Achi Aviv. Right. Eishes achi ha'av min ha'em. So Eishes achi ha'av is an issa daraisa. My father's brother's wife from my father. My father's brother's wife, all from the father. That's an erva. What about my father's brother from his mother?
My father's brother
from his mother.
Right.
So they're not, like, for instance, there's no even relation between the two of them, let's say, right? So let's say his wife. So this is my aunt. Right? My father's brother from the mother.
So you have to say it's similar to the father's.
That's a shniya to the case of father's brother min father.
Right.
Ve'eshes achi ha'em min ha'av. What about my mother's? Let me just make sure I have this right. Ve'eshes achi ha'em min ha'av. So my mother's, okay, brother from her father.
My mother's brother from her father.
All right. So think of it this way: your mom, her dad has another son.
Yeah.
That guy's wife is also to you as a shniya. She's your aunt. She's your mother's brother's wife. Just the brother is from the mother, not from the father.
Right.
Okay. What about kalas beno, your son's daughter-in-law? That's number 6. Kalas beno. Number 7.
Similar to kalasa.
So kalasa, your daughter-in-law is an erva.
Yeah.
So that's your son-in-law. It's your daughter-in-law, your son's wife. So your son's wife is a problem. What about your son's wife, your grandson's wife? Kalas beno, right?
Yeah.
That's the daughter-in-law of your son. So who's your son's daughter-in-law? That is your son's wife.
Right.
The kalas bitai, your daughter's son's wife.
Your daughter's son's wife. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So you see, these are not complicated. It's just that, like, a fifth grader you could tell these examples to, and they'll figure it out.
Very good, by the way.
Yeah. So I have that printed out. That's what I'm looking.
Look at it.
I'm looking at it here to help me. Okay. So we just said 8. We basically said 4 grandmas and 4 aunts. Keep it simple. Yeah. Continues the brisa. That despite the fact that I just told you 8 of these women who are shniyos, they're not ervas, but they are like, they smell like an erva, they look like an erva, they talk like an erva, so let's treat them like an erva. Says the brisa, umuter adam be'eshes chamav. What's a chamav? It's a father-in-law. So my father-in-law's wife, again, as long as it's not my wife's mother, right?
Yeah.
My wife's mother is my wife's mother is chamosa.
Yeah.
So let's say my father-in-law had another wife.
Yeah.
After he had my wife, he got remarried to another lady, and now he's married to some other lady. Chamav, my father-in-law's wife. So Eishes Chamav. Says the Gemara, says the Brisa Mutter. No derabanan. Now you might think, whoa, that's a big chiddush. You're telling me my mother-in-law is a problem, but the wife of my father-in-law is not? It sounds like it's really almost the same thing. I got some cases here that are very, very distantly connected. And now you're telling me, so says the Mishnah, says the Brisa, Mutter adam be'eshes chamav, your father-in-law's wife, who is not your mother-in-law. Ve'eshes chargo. What's a chargo? Is a stepson.
Why does it call him a harga?
Chargo. Chargo.
Harg to kill? Well,
No. Chargo is with a hey. Chargo is with a ches.
Oh, ches.
Chargo. Yeah. So says the Gemara. Ve'eshes chargo. So my son-in-law, his wife. Let me make sure I have that right. Stepson, not son-in-law. My stepson's wife. So a guy marries a lady. That lady brings in a son. That's my stepson. Let's say he's married. My stepson is mutter to me. Stepson's wife is mutter to me.
Right.
However, the usher bebas charga. What's a bas charga? Think of this for a second. What is the daughter of my stepson's daughter? Who is that? What is my stepson? That is my wife's son.
Yeah.
Not my son. My wife's son. Well, if my wife has a son,
it's your wife's grandson.
It's my wife's grandson. No, it's my wife's son. My stepson. My stepson.
Yeah.
It's my wife's son.
No, but his
daughter
is your wife's
his granddaughter.
Sorry.
Which would also be in the Mishnah. What did it say in the Mishnah? It said bas ishtoi, bas mita, bas bena. Bas bena is an erva.
Right.
So I asked, we're going to see in a minute, why is this Mishnah, this Brisa, which is talking about Shniyas, even mentioning in this case? This is mamash and erva.
Right.
Says the Brisa again. What did we just say? My son-in-law's wife is okay. Sorry, I keep on doing that. My stepson's wife is okay. Yeah. However, my stepson's daughter is a problem. My stepson's wife is okay. My stepson's daughter. So that means you have a mother and a daughter. I can't be with the daughter, but I can be with the mom.
Is there a difference?
Just trust me. It's hard enough as it is. What I just said was, I can be with my stepson's wife, but I cannot be with my stepson's daughter. Comes out that a woman who is closer in generation to me is mutter, and the farther generation is usher. Because who is my stepson's daughter? My wife's granddaughter. But who is my stepson's wife? Nobody. She's the woman married to my stepson, who is anyways not, he's a man. Now, if it would be my stepdaughter is completely, that's an Erev Menatayr, nothing to talk about. My stepdaughter is completely us to me. That's my wife's daughter. That's Bas Bita. Sorry, that's Bas Ishtay. That's my wife's daughter. We're talking here about my stepson. That's Bna Bas. That's the son of my wife. His wife is mutter. V'chargo mutter be'ishtay ubitay. Right, a stepson himself. Right, so my stepson is allowed to be with my wife, meaning a stepson can be with a stepmom. Meaning,
I have to interrupt. I have to go, but I just have to know where.
I have no clue, Rabbi.
Give a guess.
I would love to get to the bottom, but
42 weeks I'm gonna leave.
There's 8 of these, right?
2 dots maybe.
2 dots?
Yeah, you said 8:45.
Okay. 2 dots.
I'm gonna go to 2 dots, and then we'll pick up from here.
Okay, I
All
gotta
right,
go.
we'll have to find time to catch up. It's so important. If I say no questions, there just can't be questions because
Then we have to start off with
It says there's 8.
a lot of work. A lot of work.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem. Listen, this is Yevamos. Yevamos is not. Okay.
What is
Send
we
it.
can do Wednesday night? Another.
Yeah, it's hard. I'm so
You do
tired.
it. It's hard. It's hard for me at night too. It's hard.
Okay, let's continue. I want to finish. At least to the 2 dots. Okay. So says the Gemara. We're holding by V'chargoi, the stepson, is mutter be'ishtay ubitay. A stepson is allowed to marry his stepmom. Meaning, I have a stepson, my wife's son's, my wife's son, is mutter be'ishtay, is mutter in his stepdad's wife. Meaning, again, a stepson is my wife's son. So if I have another wife, which I can have, right? I can have 2 wives. So let's say I'm married to Dina, and Dina has a son, Yosef. So Yosef is allowed to be with my other wife, Rachel.
Surprised they didn't make them because they're about to.
There's a lot of them. The Bryce is, and not only that, he's also allowed to be with Bitay, meaning stepsisters, stepbrother and stepsister are mutter, not even midrabanan are they also. So that means you have a man and a woman who get married. I'm finishing up. I'll call you back. So, stepdaughter and a stepson are allowed to be together, technically. Reuven and man and a woman get married. Each one brings in a child from a previous marriage. They can get married. Nothing to talk about. As long as they're not from the same. Right?
Yeah.
Says the Bryce Weiter. The Eishes Chargo. This is the case what I mentioned earlier. My stepson's wife.
My stepson's wife.
My stepson's wife. By meres like can say to a man, "Ani muteres lach." I'm mutter to you. Ubiti asur lach, but my daughter is not, which makes sense because what is the daughter of my stepson's wife? That is my stepson's daughter. That's my wife's granddaughter. That's Bas Bina. Very simple case.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask a very obvious question. Bas Chargo, the daughter of my stepson, which we just explained was Bas Bina. That's my wife's granddaughter. Deraisi. What's it doing in this Bryce of Shnia? It's an Issa Deraisi. The Gemara says you're right. Tichsiv, this pasuk says Tichsiv as Bas Bina, as Bas Bita. It's right there, Bas Bina. Gemara says no, you're right. It really isn't there for itself. It's mishum de kaboy lemisni seifa. It's because the seifa of the Bryce is going to tell me that Eishes Charga Imeresli Ani Materes Lach Ubita Asur Lach, because it's about to tell me that my stepson's wife tell me that I'm mutter to you, but my daughter's usher. I need to first establish that her daughter is usher to me as Bas Bina. But if you want to learn the halachas, you can open up a chumash. But for us over here, not that way. Even though my daughter is also that's the chiddush of this Bryce. So therefore, Tana Reisha Nami Baschargo to teach me that case. So meaning the Gemara is saying that the Bryce is including one of the ervas in order to establish the halacha that there's no meaning that my stepson's wife will be mutter because There's no shnia there, despite the fact that her own daughter is also to me. So Gemara says, if that's the case, Eishes Chomiv Nami Sema. Why not mention your father-in-law's wife? Your father-in-law's wife. There's no. Let her say also, Ani mutaris lach. I am mutter to you. Ubiti asuralach. So what is she? The daughter is your wife's sister.
No, because Biti is not a surah.
Of course it is.
If you were married,
What do you mean?
her daughter.
What is the father-in-law?
The father-in-law
Is your wife's father. So that means I'm married.
It means that your wife is her daughter. So how can you say that it's
No. My father-in-law's wife is not necessarily my wife's mother.
Is not necessarily my son. That's right.
Okay, so my wife's father's wife is mutter to me.
Right.
So why doesn't the Brisa say?
Oh, but it's not her mother, right? That's why.
So why doesn't the Brisa say she could say to me, "I'm mutter to you, but my daughter's not"? Now, why is her daughter not? Because who is her daughter? Her daughter is my wife's sister from her mother, not from her father.
My wife's sister from her father.
Right? Because So since that's the case, why doesn't the Brisa include that case as well? We included a case of where the stepson's wife can say to me, "I'm mutter to you," even though my daughter's not.
Right.
Why not say that my father-in-law's wife can say to me, "I'm mutter to you," even though my daughter's not? Same case.
Right.
She's your wife's sister. So Gemara says no. Ha psikole, ha le psikole. The isser of achos ishtoi is only kolzman you're married. If your wife dies, then she's no longer usher to you.
So then you can
But
find.
when you're talking about your granddaughter, your wife's son's daughter, that wife's son's daughter is going to be usher to you forever. So we included that case. So says the Gemara. Amar Rav. Rav says, of these ladies, arba nashim yishla hefsek. 4 of them have a hefsek. Meaning we didn't really explain it before. That's a great thing. We didn't really explain it before. However, imay, let's say, is an erva.
Yeah.
We said aim imay is also a shnias.
Okay.
Now it didn't say it, but what about aim imay? I mentioned it briefly when we first started. So I said then it's going to go up all the way.
Yeah.
That's called not having a hefsek. Meaning it keeps on going. Meaning, if it just so happens to be my great-great-great-great-grandmother happens to be alive, my mother's mother, she's a shnia.
Right.
Meaning we don't stop. We don't say that aim is an erva and only her mother is for her and then everything after that. There's no hefsek. Says Rav, arba nashim yesh lahen hefsek. There are 4 exceptions. Meaning of the arayos we just mentioned, we mentioned really 8 arayos.
Mm-hmm.
Of the 8, it seems arba nashim yesh lahen hefsek. We have to figure out what they are. Meaning yesh lahen hefsek means that it does not continue. Meaning you don't say, as an example, let's say, so I just mentioned aim. Aim imay, aim imay, aim imay, right? Mother's mother. What about my father's mother?
She's a
shnia.
Shnia.
Right. Do we say what about my father's mother?
So it depends how far you're going to go.
What about my father's mother's mother?
Your
father's mother's mother.
Or your father. Okay.
Right. You see, meaning the point is that there are some examples that stop with that person and they don't continue. That's called having a hefsek. And there are some where we say they do have a continuation. So says Rav, all of the shniyos have no hefsek, except for the following 4. Arba nashim yesh lahen hefsek. What are they? And he says, Nokit Rav biyadei tlas. He can only say, he only remembered 3 of them. He knows there's 4, he'd only remembered 3. 3 of the ladies. Who are they? And here he says it. Eishes achi ha'em minav. Right, so let's work it out. Eishes achi ha'em. Right?
The wife, was it Eishes achi, the wife of my brother?
Not your brother.
No, can't remember.
Eishes achi ha'em. Your mother's brother's
brother's
your uncle.
Wife. My aunt. My aunt.
Yeah.
Okay.
So your mother's brother's wife, but not your mother min ha-mother, your mother min ha-father. So let's say I have.
Wait,
right?
What's that? Your mother's.
You have a mom.
Yeah.
Your mom has a brother.
Yeah.
That brother is her brother only from her mother.
Yes.
Her father.
Yeah.
That brother has a wife. That brother's wife to you is a shnia.
Okay.
But we say that does not then go up a generation above that. We do not say that aunt's. We don't say in
that
this case.
Mother is
we don't say Eishes achi ha'em and Eishes achi aim ha'em, meaning your mother's brother from the mother. We don't do that. The Eishes Achia of Minaim, another example, very similar. This is Eishes Achia of, so it's the same exact thing on the father's side, right?
Mhm.
So you have a father. Your father has a brother, but her brother is not a brother mina av, it's a brother Minaim.
Yeah.
That brother's wife, your aunt.
Okay.
Again, these are just fancy ways of saying aunt.
Yeah.
Right? Remember, imagine your father. Your father has.
It has to do with it has to from the mother, meaning because
It starts from the mother. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the third case is the kalosai. Kalosai is your daughter-in-law. Now, kalosai, 1 second. That's an erva.
Yeah.
So what does it mean? Ein lahefsek. So it's strange that it even belongs here. Meaning, so we'll get to it in the Gemara. Now, with the Iri, he says Mosif. He says there's another one. Now it's interesting. Rav says there are 4, and he only told us 3, and Ziri's adding one, but we'll see that Rav disagrees with this. V'Ziri Moisef, he adds one on. Af Eishes Avi Imai. So what's Eishes Avi Imai? Right? Your mother's father's wife. So your father's wife continues on and on and on and on. Meaning your father's, let's work it out. Your father's wife's an erva. So it means your father's wife's a shnia, your father's father's wife, your father's father's wife. Meaning every one of those up, that doesn't stop.
Right.
The same way Amy my, mother's mother, and your father's wife, your father's father's wife, your father's wife. Those are going to go up forever. But what about your
father's mother's
right? Af Eishes Avi Imai. What about your mother's father's wife?
Mother's father's wife.
So your mother's father's wife. What about your mother's father's wife? What about your mother's father's wife? So it says Ziri, no, we don't do that. Meaning your mother's mother, your father's wife, your father's father's wife, your father's wife, yes. But your mother's father's wife, well, that itself is a shnias, your mother's father's wife is not. We don't. That's the opinion of Ziri. Rav argues. Rav will say that's not included. If you want to remember Ziri's point, it's Di'ilah de Rav. He adds one on top of Rav. 2, he also adds it from the generation above. Rav's shnios were all. If you take a look on this chart over here, Rav's, the ones that he said that have a hefsek all are on the aunt level.
Okay.
Ziri's is up here. Ziri's is on one level up. So that's all he means. He says Rav. Rav, my time, why does Rav not include this example? Gemara says because michlaf alei be'eshes avi aviv, because he doesn't agree. He says we're nervous that you're going to confuse your mother's father's wife with your father's wife, and therefore he holds that it comes off of that, and therefore the shnia is going to continue. No problem. Musiri. He says on your father's side, you're familiar with the family, and since you're familiar with the family, you're not going to come to make a mistake. Whereas for a mother, you're not as familiar with your mother's side. I don't know where Ziri gets this from, but he says that you're not as familiar with the mother's side, and therefore you might start making mistakes, and therefore he felt that there shouldn't be a
really it does make sense because
different families are different, but yeah,
you know what I'm saying, because if in general, so the kala goes to the husband, and the husband generally right.
The kolosai, daughter-in-law. We said in the Braisa that kolosai is there, and that's ein la hefsek. Sorry, it has a hefsek.
Yeah.
Your daughter-in-law has a hefsek. Now, what does that mean? Kolosai the Raisa he. So what is it doing by shnias? What is it doing? You're saying that there's a shnias that has no hefsek. Gemara says no. The Torah says you can't be with daughter-in-law. The Gemara says you're right. It's a mistake. Ema kalas b'noi. So really, the third case of Rav that does not have it, that has a hefsek, meaning to say it doesn't go, is your son's daughter-in-law, which is your son's daughter, wife.
But wouldn't that be a problem for
son's wife?
Your son's wife is
your son's daughter-in-law. Your daughter-in-law is an erva.
Right.
So says the Gemara, Amos kalas b'no yesh lahefsek. Are you saying kalas b'no? What do you mean? Are you saying to me that your son's wife is going to be
okay?
Right. That's what he's saying. He's saying that it's yesh lahefsek. That's not true. V'hatanya kalasai erva kalas b'noi shnia v'cheinata imr b'bnoi ubein b'noi ad seif kol hadayros.
Right.
So you see that it doesn't stop. So it's your son's wife, your son's wife, your son's wife, all the way down.
Okay,
Keep on going down.
I was thinking because I was like this. If it's going to say from the bottom up, it's going to be a problem. From the top down will also be an issue.
Yeah, hefsek goes in both directions, from the top and from the bottom. Yeah. Ela ema kalas bitoi. No, we're talking. You're right. Son's wife goes until however many generations you can possibly fit into your lifetime.
Mhm.
But what about your daughters? Right? Kalas bita. You have a daughter, and your daughter has a son.
Your daughter.
Your daughters,
And your daughter has a son,
and he has a wife.
and he has a wife.
So your daughter has a daughter-in-law, has a son-in-law, has a
Yeah.
daughter-in-law.
Has a daughter-in-law.
Kalasai, she's a daughter-in-law, and that daughter-in-law is usher to you. Kalas bita.
Yeah.
It's in Shnias, but that kalas bita stops there. We don't say that if your daughter has a son, and then that son has a son, then that son's wife is a problem. We don't do that. We don't keep on going down. That's what Rav meant. The Amr of Chizda Hamilsa Migaver Rabbi Shmieli Umanu Ravami Lo Osru Kala Ela Bibnei Kala. We don't ask her the daughter-in-law except because she herself is an erva. And not only that, Kiladai, the astrologers told me, Milfana Havias, you'll be a great chacham.
Yeah.
Amina, and I thought to myself, Yigavra Rabba Havina, if I'll truly be a great chacham, Asbara Midaiti, I'll be able to explain in my own words this statement that Reb Ami said of the what do you call it? That what's the spot? That loy asur kala mipnei kala. What does this statement mean? That they didn't asur a kala except mipnei kala. The phrase doesn't make sense.
Hold on, back up. There's nobody here. I have a good question.
Well, let's just learn the Gemara first, though, because it's a hard Gemara. I want to read the Gemara, then you can ask me a question. Yeah. So what's the Gemara saying over here? Gemara is saying that Reb says Rav Chizda, I heard a great thing from Reb Ami.
Mhm.
What was the thing I heard? That he said the following phrase: "Lei osru kala el bibnei kala," which we don't know what that means yet. And he, Rav Chizda, said that I was once told by an astrologer that I'll be a great chacham, and I didn't know if it would come true or not. And I figured, you know what? Let me test to see if it came true by seeing if I could figure out what Rav Chizda meant, meaning what Rav Ami meant. Sorry, what meaning to say, if I could figure it out, midaiti, then it'll be that what that astrologer said came true. And imikrid dardiki havina, and if it turns out that I'm not such a big guy, meaning okay, I'm a regular guy, I learned, but I don't really know what I'm talking about. Ashaylu mirabanan, to asal beikinish, I'll go to shul and I'll ask some of the rabbis in shul. But either way, hashta now savrasa midaiti, I was able to figure it out, and I explained the following is the explanation of what Rav Ami meant when he said loy asru kala ela bibnei kala, meaning loy asru kalas bita. They didn't answer my daughter's daughter-in-law. Ela mishum kalas benai. The only reason why she's usher to me is because she's very similar to my son's daughter-in-law. Meaning to say, and therefore, I think what the understanding is that, and therefore, one second. Yeah, that the erva of my daughter's daughter-in-law, that is because of my son's daughter-in-law.
This is Rashi says.
Yeah. So Amalei Abai LeRava. Abai says to Rava, Asber Lacha. I'll explain it to you. You can have families like this. You could go in Kolos the Babe Bartzissa, who had many daughter-in-laws. You have a scenario where you can have a lot of daughters and a lot of daughter-in-laws, or Rav Papa Amr could go in Kolos the Babe Rav Papa, Bar Abba, Rav Ashi Amr could go in Kolos the Babe Mari Bar Isaac. Whatever. He's just giving examples of different families where they had many daughters, many sons, and therefore the daughters had a lot of sons, and those daughters who had sons had wives, had many different ones. So therefore, they're all going to be usher.
Right.
Okay, we'll pause over here. But you had a question, so.
Yeah, a question on the astrology.